Welcome to Building Your World, the commercial real estate development and investment podcast. Here, you can find insightful discussions covering industry-related topics across all asset classes and markets.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Building Your World. I am Nicholas Long, and I'm joined again by Will Ellis and McKay Brabham. And fortunately for us, we are also joined again by our friend Daniel Fallas-Naranjo for his second podcast. Thanks for tuning in, Danny. What's going on? How is everything?
Yeah, thank you for having me again, and more than excited to be part of this second chapter for sure.
Yeah, good. Yeah, no, I'm certain that going forward we'll have you on a bunch more podcasts in the future. So looking forward to it. What's going on, Will?
Not much. Busy.
Good. How about you, McKay? How you doing?
Same here. Nothing crazy in the past couple weeks coming through, but work is steady.
I've been working like crazy. I've had so much going on. So, hey, McKay, sorry we didn't get to run into each other last weekend. So
I know. I'm sorry. I was down in your neck of the woods and you were in mine.
I know. Yeah. So, Danny, Will, last weekend I got really excited because I had to go to a St. Patrick's Day festival with some people in McKay's hometown, and I texted him, and he was like, "Actually, I'm heading down to your neck of the woods." So he was down here. So we just literally passed each other on the interstate twice, and yeah.
Columbia does St. Patrick's Day really big. It would have been fun to be together.
Yeah, it would have been great. But I did run into some of your buds, some of your best buds. Ran into William and JT, and ran into Jack. Obviously, those three were together, and then I got to see your brother too.
A good squad.
So great. Well, yeah. So today we're completing our second conversation with Danny, which will simply be a long-form discussion about various topics that we find interesting about the current happenings in the industry. The idea here is to bring up something that we have read about or are paying attention to, and to share our perspective and some thoughts. So I guess since I'm already talking, I will jump into mine first. So a very interesting lawsuit was brought to my attention sometime last week that is similar to a topic that I have been thinking about a lot recently. The article is from The Real Deal, titled "LeFrak, Citing Nightmarish Delays, Takes Housing Court to Court." The subline reads, "Landlord Says Rigged System Deprives Owners of Property Rights." So for those of you who may not know, LeFrak is a massive development and investment group based in New York. They're actually one of the largest landlords in New York City, and they have recently filed a lawsuit against the city's Office of Court Administration and Civil Court, which are in charge of handling eviction suits. Now, the suit alleges that the courts have a statutory obligation to hear housing disputes efficiently and judiciously, and that they have failed at that directive. So essentially, they are suing because the eviction process takes too long. To set up a little bit of a backstory for this, the state had a COVID-related eviction moratorium that was terminated in January of 2022. And for the last couple of years, there's been some serious delays and significant backlog in the court, which has impacted many landlords in New York City. LeFrak stated, quote, "Under the state's real property law, if a tenant answers a non-payment suit, a trial or hearing should be scheduled 3 to 8 days later," end of quote. However, the complaint suggests that the city has been setting the court date out for 2 months and then routinely adjourning for an additional 2 to 3 months. They state that at minimum it takes about 4 months to evict a non-paying tenant, and most of the time it takes longer. So taking a step back for a second, the thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently is just how slow some government and local municipalities seem to move across the U.S. More specifically, how slow things such as the entitlement process are with design approvals, permitting, rezoning, etc. And then obviously outside of the development side, just evictions, utility work, and so on. Now, I often think about the financial impact that this has on property owners. So on the eviction side, a minimum 4 month period with a non-paying tenant in place is at minimum a 33% reduction in revenue for that unit, right? And one that you cannot release because it's currently occupied. And of course, we all know that a vacant unit ultimately costs a landlord less money than a unit with a non-paying occupant. So obviously, if a unit's occupied and there's no one paying, of course you're paying for the wear and tear that they're putting on the unit at the same time. Now, thinking about it in terms of development, in most places it takes nearly a year to get permission to put a shovel in the ground, which creates huge barriers to entry for smaller and less capitalized players that have to bear the weight of carried costs that increase as the timeline of the project increases, such as, for example, interest carry. If a large and well capitalized landlord like LeFrak has enough of an issue with timing to sue New York City, think about how it affects the smaller groups. Now, evictions, specifically in residential, can be a bit of a sore subject for sure. But what I'm wondering is, will this open up the floodgates on similar suits targeting the slow and gridlocked municipalities? And will landlords seek to hold the government accountable for the financial loss associated with lengthened project and operations timelines? Do any of you guys have some thoughts on the subject?
Sure. For the permitting side of things, DC and I think a few other municipalities across the U.S. have switched to the pay to play model. So if you're a large developer and you got the capital, you can pay them $60,000 and you can have your approved drawings in under a month. But if you're not one of those guys and you want to build a house or do a small tenant uplift, DCRAs through their permitting process is going to make you hang around for at least 2 months. And that process can go as long as a year should they have comments that you can't address in a timely manner. So I think that goes to your point in saying that the disparity between the players that can play in the market and the guys that can't is ever widening.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was thinking from the perspective of a less capitalized tenant. Like, think about someone who has interest carry that they need to cover over the course of the project. Let's say they finance early to get moving on stuff, and they have to work through, their entitlements process while paying interest. I mean, I feel like that could be pretty detrimental. But McKay, do you have any thoughts on the subject?
I have a couple thoughts on it. We have one project that's it's a housing a lot development where we're doing the land development of a couple hundred lots here in Greenville County, and the entitlements process. I guess entitlements might be the wrong word, but trying to obtain final plat has taken an extraordinarily long time, and we've been months behind on selling these lots to the land developer. That we do have a takedown agreement in place with one of the larger home builders in the country, but we've been unable to deliver lots to them when we plan to because the local jurisdiction has been so slow at delivering a final plat and addresses and everything that we need to turn them over. So yeah, this is both the problem on the front end of the entitlements process and then on the back end once you've, like in our case, we've created our product but we're not able to sell it yet.
Yeah, I was thinking about, just I assume that, like many developers, you guys tend to utilize the due diligence period for entitlements. In most cases, it sounds like this may not be
Yeah.
one, but we all know that developers typically try to obtain all necessary permissions and entitlements during the due diligence period. And so I don't know if y'all have noticed this too, but the due diligence period on a lot of contracts are really long nowadays,
Mm,
which obviously financially impacts the seller, right? On the back end, it makes land and buildings less liquid. So that's one of the things I think. What do you think, Danny?
Hey Nick, yeah, I just wanted to share something that well, we are working on a project in Fountain, and that belongs the property belongs to the Greenville County,
Hmm.
And what I've noticed is that there are sometimes the institutions that they are involved in the subdivision process. They, sometimes they cannot be well coordinated. I'm talking about like water letters, sewer letters. You need some of those requirements to go through the subdivision process. And depending on the jurisdiction or the zoning or the use of land, there are always things in between that makes this process even harder. And you need to talk to each institution separately to put them all together and try to get things done. So it's just an efficient process, at least what I have experienced in this specific project that we have going on in Fountain. And again, as you said, that just increased the cost of any development, and it just makes everything less competitive from an investment standpoint, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, thinking about it, governments, and of course, I understand the gridlock. Everyone is having trouble staffing. So it's obvious that these municipalities are struggling with staffing issues as well. But obviously, governments are not incentivized to move quickly or with any regard for the financial challenges of the private sector. So therefore, they don't move quickly, and instead of post COVID kind of digging themselves out of this hole, it seems that unfortunately many municipalities have become sort of complacent and sit where they lie. But now on the eviction side, I just wanted to touch on it quickly. What people fail to mention is that filing for eviction typically occurs after several months of non-payment anyways. So I mean, it's safe to say that in many cases, like for this one in New York with LeFrak, I mean, you could be looking at units that are vacant for, I mean, sorry, units that are occupied by a non-paying tenant for like 6 months. Think about that as half the revenue on a unit for the year. I don't know what the answer is there, but do you guys think that we're going to see a lot more lawsuits like this across the country for other developers in their respective markets?
I mean, probably because otherwise it's a barrier to entry that nobody will even want to continue attempting to develop in, and then that's less investment to an area. In which case, it does come back around to the jurisdiction um, and hurt them.
Sure.
So if they don't, if they move slowly throughout the eviction process, would you think, because at that point the government is allowing somebody to live under a roof at no cost and is essentially by their delay subsidizing, um, if you could call it affordable housing, if it takes longer than a month to go work through that process, do you think the municipalities, New York in this instance, should share that burden since they're using that property through their delay?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Yeah, I just believe, as trying to think in both, let's say, part of the discussions, like, or when you're a tenant and when you're a landlord, at the end, what you want to validate are your rights. In this case, the landlord, the rights of ownership, and in this case, the tenant. That in this case, if they are not paying more rent by law, or their right is, they are not paying for having the right of shelter, right, anymore. So I understand that there is a legal process that needs to be taken, but at a reasonable timeline, right? And I think that's the main discussion here. What is too much, and knowing that everybody has rights, uh, how can they validate them through a really, let's say, quick process, and trying to not hurt both
Both
positions or both
parties,
parties.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I kind of think about that. Like, whatever happens with this case, I think they're bound to change the laws. As LeFrak pointed out, they feel that the court should schedule these hearings within 3 to 8 days. Now, if that actually is in the New York law, that's certainly going to be rewritten after this place takes place, and possibly in many other municipalities as well. So, and then I just wanted to say one other thing about this topic. I just thought you guys would think it's interesting. I know of and have heard various eviction stories about, like eviction scammers that go around, particularly in some of the markets that I work in. And you guys would not believe this, but they go around with their companies. It could even be a franchise, whatever. They convince people to lease them space. They might pay a couple months of rent, and then they just stop paying, right? Again, I've heard a couple stories where this happens. They stop paying, and then they convince the landlord that they're working on a big contract and that they'll soon be flush with cash and all this. And the landlord typically will hold on. And then, of course, the eviction process starts. And they know how to kind of work the system. They're always appealing at the last second on the last day, convincing the court to give them, different types of payment plans. So, when they go through the eviction process often and they know how to work it, sometimes they do this in a row. So I know of a group that, it's been rumored around town that they've done this multiple times. They keep going to different landlords. They're leasing some industrial space and they might be there for, 4 months and then move on to the next building. And yeah, talk about a way to keep overhead low. Anyway, yeah, that was a good wrap to that. Let's move on to the next topic. McKay, what do you have in store for us today?
Yeah, so I remember you had talked about what your kind of 2024 prediction, and it was kind of along the lines of data center demand and its boom. And I thought that was kind of a timely discussion. I saw an article a couple weeks ago on CoStar that was talking about how the major cloud companies are averaging a 30% annual investment growth, which is expected, I think, for the next few years, and we've seen that over the past few years. And that's between like Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, and Oracle. And it's kind of funny to look back and think about how when I first kind of became interested in this topic a few years ago when we were in school together, a lot of it was driven by e-commerce boom and data centers needed to support the growth in e-commerce. And then over the past year, we've seen the explosion of artificial intelligence, and it's been really interesting over the past year, and then even again, especially over the past month, to see this kind of next frontier exploding and these new chips being released just yesterday to support this growth. And then the amount that I guess consumers believe in these companies, specifically Nvidia, this company that produces these chips and supercomputers needed to run these data centers and perform a lot of this artificial intelligence. But I don't know. It's interesting to see how much room there is for this sector to grow, especially at the pace that it's been growing. At what point do people not need to purchase new products in this sector like they have been?
Right. So you're kind of questioning, I guess you're sort of questioning the tide of data centers back to traditional industrial, like we saw with the e-commerce boom.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And so are you saying you sort of think that maybe this is going to be more resilient than that e-commerce boom was, or people might be more careful about the way they flush cash into the asset class?
I mean, I think
Yeah.
that this has been it's kind of a subsector niche sector of industrial, and it is still flush with cash, and there's been huge investment in it lately. And yeah, I guess my question is, do we think this will be more resilient, and is the run up reflected in stock prices of these companies that we're seeing right now, it and the investment in these data center developers, is it justified, or do we think that we're going to wind up with kind of like on the industrial side, a lot of vacant square footage in markets that we thought were really hot?
Sure. I've got sort of like a question for a question here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, so obviously, because of the high demand, you can argue that it's at least undersupplied right now. Data centers are.
Yep.
Um, so the first question that comes to mind is, how hard is it to turn a standard warehouse into a data center? Like, what infrastructure needs do we need? Obviously, I'm assuming, as you've said before, you need access to significant water for cooling these machines.
Mm-hmm.
You obviously, so a ton of water. I don't know what other infrastructure needs would probably be.
Yeah, really heavy electricity need. Really heavy
Yeah,
electricity need.
yeah,
And then gas too for um, which I would imagine is less used on a day to day basis, but for the generators because
yeah,
these things have to be so over redundant they cannot go down.
yeah. No, that's interesting. So, like, is it possible to take? We've talked about vacancy of the big box industrial in various markets, such as the upstate of South Carolina. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, would it be possible? I know that traditionally data centers have been in their these kind of different markets. Like, we know that Northern Virginia is a big one that serves DC. I mean, could we see more data centers in more places across the US?
I think that we probably could. I feel like these developers are running to where they're getting access to low cost electricity um,
Sure.
and water. I think that's kind of the big driver. I think that there's such a need to store data now more so than there was, let's say, 15 years ago. Where 15 years ago, maybe it made sense to kind of stay in either markets that were very close to their consumers, like the DC area, like maybe the Dallas area, or up in kind of the Washington area that served kind of the Pacific coast. And it was also in areas that were they had really good climates, much safer from natural disaster than a lot of other locations. I think there's probably such a demand to store data now that people are willing to go where they're offered the best deals and can
Sure.
make the best investment on it.
Yeah. And then obviously have, fiber network installed already and everything else that they might need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting. I guess to go back and answer your question, I mean, I feel like the need for, as you said, the need to store data as we're entering the AI age is so much greater. I hope that I'm not wrong by saying this, but yeah, I mean, I just feel like there's significant demand, and that at least for the foreseeable future, we're supplied, and I do believe that it takes quite a specialized developer, a more like a niche developer to really master a data center that's useful, efficient, has good fundamentals for the back end user. So yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic, I would say, about it, and I think that you're right in your assumption that it will continue to grow, and it's not just the next hot thing. The way that storage, self storage units were, or big box industrial, car washes, and so on. But what do you guys think, Will?
I mean, I think there's a future there. Like you guys have said, entering the AI era, the demand for storing data is going to be insane. And I feel like a few of these new areas that align with what McKay was saying, cheap energy, lots of water. Um, and think about where I am now. Energy is not inexpensive, and there's not a whole lot of water. So curious where that next location is going to be. Would love a little insight there, McKay.
Thank you. It's interesting to see even this week we've been able to see Nvidia release these new chips and talk about the kind of computations they're able to do and how many they can do at a time and how there's over 208 billion transistors on one graphics card about
Jeez.
this big. But first, it'll be weird to I guess figure out how many actual uses for this stuff will there be in the future? Like I don't know all of the ways that AI is going to be implemented in our life. None of us do, and so we can't. We probably are not people that can accurately predict that demand. Whereas maybe it was a little bit different thinking about. We were able to say, okay, COVID happened. We're stuck in our house. There's X amount of old people that probably don't like to use the internet, but now that they have to, and it was probably it made a little bit more sense to think about and justify the industrial development. Whereas here, there's a little bit more of a frontier aspect to it.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Danny, thoughts on the data center sector?
No, I just wanted to add that, as McKay said, the first driver was the e-commerce during COVID, and now we're seeing the AI era. So maybe in 5, 10 years, it will be something that we have no idea. And it's just technology in general, like the demand for technology or space that will be occupied by technologies company. I think it's something that will keep growing in the future, and it's just about providing the right, let's say, sites, or the right sites, and knowing that whatever the state or states or the areas where they will have tax incentives, or they will have good utility providers, that will be the places where all these companies will go and look for future data centers sites.
Right. Good point. Hey, so do y'all remember we spoke one time with, was it like AWS, the AWS head of real estate?
Yeah,
Hmm.
Yeah. At that time, he told us that they owned all their data centers. Do you know if that's still the case?
I have no idea.
Are
No.
data centers becoming more privatized? Is what I want to know. Because I feel like I remember him saying that AWS owned all of their data centers for security reasons.
I think it depends on. So there's enterprise level data storage, there's co-location, and then there's hyperscale. Hyperscale are the big companies that we think of, like your Amazon, your Microsoft, your Netflix. These are the guys that need an entire data center worth of space, and I think that they would probably have their own equipment and it would be their own facility. Whereas co-location might be, we have a company and we don't want to keep all of our servers in our personal server room. We would like the redundancy of keeping it somewhere else. And so we're going to rent space in someone else's building, their data center. I think that a lot of companies that aren't the absolute behemoths, that's kind of how they operate. And I think that they'll probably continue to operate. But I think that probably the biggest players who have just gobs of money would probably want to own their own, for security reasons, and to
Hmm.
maintain control.
Yeah.
I got a question for you, McKay. Do you think less populated, natural resource rich states would incentivize these developers or companies to come to their state and build a data center? I'm thinking of one town in the western United States that has a massive reservoir for a town of 2,000 people. They could easily use that excess water to help cool these uh, these pieces of equipment. And is the water recyclable? Like, could you just pump it back into the reservoir and use it again, or is it done after you've cooled the machines?
I cannot answer that question. I would imagine that it's recyclable.
You probably just couldn't pump out hot water. They probably wouldn't let you put hot water back in the reservoir. But I think that's a excellent point. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
how many people have to work in a data center, McKay? Do you
like
know?
like a handful, if that.
Yeah,
It's not many. I think it's a few security guards and then some technicians. Um,
sure.
it's not like there's a bunch of people, even if it was probably a massive data center. Maybe if you're really out in the boonies, I think a consideration is probably like, do you have, let's say, the big enough fiber lines to cost effectively run to you? I mean, are you able to pay for them to come just a couple thousand miles? I don't know. Maybe that's cost prohibitive. But I think if you have like heavy power transmission lines and can build the necessary substation out there, that would probably work. And you probably don't need tons of people. I would say that maybe heavy amounts of snow could be a factor, but I would also think not, because I know plenty of areas in the U.S. where they are building these things and they get real winters.
Sure. You got any ideas, Will?
I got a few.
I mean, I know you'd ideally want to stay away from natural disaster prone locations, because the idea of building these things is that they're kind of mission critical. They need to be redundant, and the idea is that you can't let them go down.
Avalanche.
Doesn't get more redundant than controlling your own natural gas well that powers your emergency generators.
There you go.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, no, that was a great discussion. Do any of y'all have anything else to add?
Sorry, I rambled.
No, that was perfect. That
I had
was
a very
really
I had
well
a very
done.
hard time trying to like say my thoughts, and I didn't know what I wanted. I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
just kind of curious about it all. I am curious, like where in this business that is so cash rich right now, like where is there opportunity for people like us to do anything?
Right. Yeah,
Is
I
there
understand
not?
that.
Do you just invest in digital realty and Nvidia and Amazon and say, we'll see?
Yeah.
My
Yes.
my guy, I just have a question. Like, do I mean where do you take the water? Like, is such a big need because I'm aware about like air conditioning, like HVAC, let's say systems and power,
Mhm.
but water, I didn't know that was something big for data centers.
Well, I know that it is, but I don't know how it works.
I think the machines are just water cooled. It takes a ton of water.
Yeah.
Really? But I would imagine that's the AC system. But that's what I'm asking. It's just I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
It sounds like there's a lot more to learn about the data center sector, and
Yeah.
that we definitely need to get a data center expert on the podcast at some point to chat with us. I think yeah, we have
So
an idea of who we could
quick
get on.
quick side note on this, and yes, that would be really really awesome if we did
That'd
get
be
him.
really special. Yeah.
Quick side note on this. When I was looking for an internship during the program, and had talked to that guy, and then I had gotten in touch through Anna's uncle with a guy who was one of the like managing partners. He was one of the owners, I think, or he was a partner there, one of the like top two guys, maybe CEO of out of Dallas, and they're like a kind of a household name in that world. They are. Um, and I like exchanged like one or two emails with him, and then he just like went cold on me. Then like 8 months later, no, because I was looking in like January. It was then December when I was about to start my real job that I had now gotten, and he emailed and was like, same thread from 11 months ago. Was like, hey man, are you still looking for a job? And I was like, are you kidding me? And
No way.
and then I'm reading on CoStar last week, and this dude is now head of data centers at.
Oh, no
Really?
way.
Yeah,
Oh wow.
pretty cool. I'm like, well, that would have been cool if it
Well,
worked out.
yeah. If you would have gone there, he might would have scooted out on you and gone to. Maybe you'd be at.
I don't know. All right, we can carry on.
Will, what do you have prepared for us?
So I found this article and I thought it was interesting because it summarizes everything you see on a construction project if you've been on one in the last 5 years. You see a lot of old men. You don't see a lot of young men out there, specifically electricians, plumbers, HVAC techs, those kind of more skilled trades. And you think about what you hear in the news, what you heard growing up, that you should go to college, you should get a 4 year degree. College will set you up for success. That's the best path to head down. Unfortunately, that bastardized the trades, and people, they are not entering the trades at the same rate that they did 25, 30 years ago. That will lead to major challenges trying to develop here in the next 5 to 15 years. As that older workforce slowly begins to retire, the average age of a construction worker today is 55 years old. So when those guys move on, there's fewer people to take their place. Costs for those skilled trades are going to go up, but it's not all doom and gloom. A few states have heard their constituents, heard their concerns, and they've actually proactively taken steps to encourage students to pursue the trades rather than thinking college is the only option for them. So I know in Montgomery County, where I grew up, the larger 4,000 3,000 to 4,000 kid public schools. They all have shop classes and things that set them up to enter the trades, exposure to them. I've been talking to electricians over the last year, what they're doing to go out and recruit the next generation of workers. They're going to meet in these schools, giving presentations, offering internships, all sorts of different things to help try to recruit people. But if it can't be addressed in the near future, and I think it's going to take not only the private sector but the public sector to address it, I think costs are going to go up significantly, and we're going to see much longer schedules on construction projects. I think building homes, single family homes, is going to be more difficult as these firms focus on bigger paying gigs rather than more sporadic, lower paying gigs that come along with residential home building. Anybody got any thoughts?
I've never really thought about it quite like this. I guess tied to immigration and the steady supply of cheap labor. Or I guess I haven't thought about it in that sense. I have thought about it in the sense of it doesn't seem that people are pursuing trade schools, and it kind of seems like people are pursuing more and more degrees and spending more on education where it might not be providing the best value for you down the road. I see a lot of articles about people going and finishing their 4-year degree and then deciding on some ridiculous master's program that they spend 300 grand on for 3 years, and the average starting salary is like $40,000 coming out of school where they can't find a job.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. This brings up some interesting points.
Yeah. So, Will, like, how would you fix the problem?
I think low cost workers is only one side of it. I think the skilled trades is the other side. I believe if you go into a school and you meet with a bunch of 15 to 18-year-old guys and you ask them why they want to go to college, I think the answer 99% of the time is to make money at the end of the day. And if you can go in there and show them that you'll start making money day one, you won't have to take on any debt. And after a handful of years, you'll be in a position that not many other people will be in because there's not many other people in those trades to start your own business, be your own boss, and make that money you're hoping to see by going to a 4-year college and a 4-year degree.
Right. Go ahead, Danny.
Just wanted to say that yeah, I believe it could be an immigration, let's say, issue, but also I think the best way to approach this is on the education system and just bring the skills for people who are smart enough to see those opportunities in the future. But I know that will take, when you are that young, you probably don't think too much about that. But just investing in trying to bring a new image to the trade, let's say, occupation or professionalism of that type of work. I think that's the best idea or approach, and knowing that they can make money, as Will said, it just they probably don't think about it. That's not their first option. But maybe if it is the second one or the third one, they might be thinking about it. But probably right now there's no it's not an option for them. I will believe.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, making it more attractive for kids to see these career alternatives is better. And I think you raise a great point with this kind of being an effect of pushing for higher education when most people would benefit greatly by going into a trade, starting their own business young, and then just kind of gaining that street smart.
Yeah, maybe they reframe what education truly is. Like
Sure.
you go to college, you spend all this money, you get a degree at the end, but what'd you really learn? You know,
Yeah.
like I was just saying, maybe we should reframe what an education is because I feel like the way it's been framed is you're only intelligent and smart if you go to a 4-year college. While there are plenty of people that enter the trades that are far more intelligent than that kid that had no idea what he wanted to do and went to college for 4 years, graduated with a piece of paper, and is now working a desk job he hates because he had no path in life.
Yeah, no, it kind of, and this is kind of a funny comment, but I know someone who said there's a lot of multimillionaires in the construction industry with a high school education.
The guy that owns the porta potty company, he's a millionaire.
Mm-hmm. He is. He is. No, for sure. I just been thinking, Nick, that what is stated there that back in November was the highest amount of job openings in construction since 2000, and knowing the current policies and all that we have discussed, like, is this going to be even just getting worse and worse if there is no action from the public uh, institutions? Or I know the private also has a role to play with in this subject, but it seems to be more like a macro level issue than GC is trying to capture people or young generation to train them or to teach them how to do the construction work. But I just think it has to be a state level or a government level where this needs to, if we want to reverse the effect that we are seeing today with this lack of people in construction.
See, I can I can appreciate what you're saying for sure, but I definitely feel like it's more of a private sector correction.
Okay.
I mean, what we're seeing is a supply crunch. We're seeing supply crunches all over the place. Well, now it's also in the service sector, specifically in skilled trades, right? So I think it's, to your point, Danny, it's like it's more about opening up the visibility of the trades as opportunity for these kids, perhaps offering them stuff, perhaps offering them the courses and stuff like that in school. But then after that, it's just kind of the free market cure where, hey, a kid's going to look at it, and there's a lot of content and information out in the world right now about a lot of people have had success stories, after dropping out of school. We've always heard this, and all the people that go into trades and start their own trade business and become successful. I think, yeah, again, it's more about how to make the trades visible, and then people will see, hey, there's a way to kind of fill this demand, and they'll move into the sector. I think it'll self correct. I think about it in the way that I hear some of, I've got younger cousins, and people have kids that I know, and some that are high school age. I'm hearing about some of these courses they're offering now, and it's like nothing close to the stuff we were offered when we were growing up. Like, I saw my little cousin was had a class where she had to basically evaluate different credit cards based on the different services and rewards and stuff that they had, and then she had to choose which one was the best, and they had a whole report on how to select the right credit card for them. Kids are taking coding classes. I know several parents whose kids are actually required to take two or more coding classes, so these kids are learning how to code software. It does seem, tax classes, for example, there's also kids that are taking much more in-depth tax classes, learning how to do taxes in high school. So it does seem that there is a deeper effort here to educate kids on practical skill at a younger age. So that's great. Next, throw in trades in there, and you'll see a bunch of kids flood in.
So I got one comment there. If in high school you can earn college credit, why can't you get an electrical apprenticeship during your senior year?
That's a really good question. That would be a great idea.
I'm going to write my senator.
There you go. Start there. That's great. No, that's an incredible idea though. Is You're right. I mean, you can get all these credits in education for higher ed. Well, what about an apprenticeship? Electrical, plumbing, mechanical, whatever. Yeah, no, that'd be great. Well, great. Yeah, guys, good discussion today. That looks like a wrap for our topics. Looking forward to the next one. I want to say thank you again, Danny, for jumping on the pod to talk with us. We're looking forward to hopefully having you on the pod many times over in the future. And I will look forward to those discussions. And for McKay and Will, I'm looking forward to our next one. We are starting to create a larger and larger guest list for people that we will have on the pod. From our discussion today, it looks like we definitely need to get someone on that can teach us a bit more about data centers. So thanks for jumping on, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, McKay. Danny, it was great to see you.
Good to see you,
Even though
Danny.
you're gone now.
And we will see you next time.